What if everything you've ever been told about who you are is wrong? Not wrong in a small way, not wrong in a maybe I should reconsider kind of way, but fundamentally, deeply, completely wrong. What if the life you're living right now, the doubts you carry, the feeling that something is missing, what if all of that is happening because nobody ever told you the one truth that changes everything? Stay with me, because by the time this ends, you will never see yourself the same way again. Hey, welcome back! Or if this is your first time here, welcome! I'm really glad you found this. Today, we're going into something different. Something that's less about strategies or habits or morning routines, and more about something that sits underneath all of that. Something deeper. We're talking about a book called Nature of the Divine by Alfas B. And I want to be honest with you before we begin. This book is not easy to hold lightly. It's the kind of book you read once, and then you find yourself thinking about it in the shower 3 weeks later, at a traffic light, in the middle of a conversation with someone, and you drift off because a sentence from this book just surfaced in your mind like something you were always supposed to know. That's the kind of book this is. And if you've been feeling lately like there's more to life than what you can see, if you've been carrying a quiet hunger, this unnamed feeling that you are somehow more than you appear to be, then this is for you. And honestly, if this kind of content moves you, hit that subscribe button, because we go deep here every single time. Alright, let's begin. Let's start with a question, a simple one. What is divine? Go on, think about it for a second. Most people immediately think of a religion, a church, a temple, a god sitting somewhere above the clouds, watching over everything. And that's fair. That's what most of us were taught. But Alfas B opens this book with something that quietly shakes that image. He asks, what if the divine is not somewhere above you? What if it's not something you reach after you die? What if it's not something you earn through rituals or prayers or perfect behavior? What if the divine is the very substance you are made of? Just let that land for a moment. Because here's the thing. Most of us are walking around with this invisible wall in our minds. On one side of that wall, there is the divine, the sacred, the eternal, the limitless, the perfect. And on the other side, there is us, human, flawed, temporary, struggling. And we spend our whole lives pressing our faces against that wall, reaching for something on the other side, trying to be good enough, spiritual enough, worthy enough to touch it. But Alfas B says something that the entire book is built around. He says, the wall is not real. There is no wall. There never was. Now, you might be thinking right now, okay, that sounds nice. That sounds like something you'd put on a motivational poster. But what does that actually mean? That's exactly where the book takes us. And trust me, the answer goes much deeper than a poster. To understand the nature of the divine, you first have to understand something about the human mind. The human mind is a separator. That is literally what it does. That is its function. It looks at the world and it divides. This is mine, that is yours. This is good, that is bad. This is sacred, that is ordinary. This is God, that is human. And in many ways, that ability to separate, to categorize, to define, it's what allowed civilization to exist. It's incredibly useful. But Alfas B points to a very specific moment in human consciousness where this useful tool became a trap. And the trap is this. We began to use that same separating mind to separate ourselves from the source of our own being. Imagine this. Picture a wave in the ocean. Now picture that wave becoming self-aware. It can think, it can feel, it can look around and observe other waves. And it starts to think, who am I? And it looks at itself, and it sees a shape, a particular rise and fall, a specific form. And it says, I am this wave. And in doing so, it forgets something. It forgets that it is also the ocean. Not separate from it, not created by it in a distant, disconnected way, but literally made of it, moving with it, inseparable from it. The wave doesn't have ocean inside it. The wave is the ocean, expressing itself in a particular form. This is one of the most stunning images in this entire book, because Alfas B is saying, that is exactly what you are. You are not a person who has a spirit inside you. You are the divine, expressing itself as a person. And the whole game of life, the suffering, the longing, the searching, it begins the moment you forget that. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Most spiritual teachings treat this forgetting as a problem, a fall from grace, a sin, an error that must be corrected. But Alfas B does something remarkable here. He says, the forgetting was intentional, not in a cold, cruel way, not like some distant god playing games with you, but in the way that an actor becomes so immersed in a role that they temporarily lose themselves in the character. And for a while, that immersion is the whole point. Think about this. You've probably watched a movie where an actor completely disappeared into their role, where you forgot it was acting, where you felt every emotion as if it were real. Now imagine if, in the middle of the most intense scene, the actor stopped, looked at the camera, and reminded you it's just a film. The spell would be broken. The experience would be lost. And Alfas B argues that something like this is happening in human life. The divine chose to forget itself so it could truly experience the full range of being. The joy, the grief, the confusion, the longing, the love, the loss, the search, the return, all of it, the complete human experience. And you are not a mistake in that story. You are the story. You are the divine, in the middle of the most immersive experience it has ever created. Now I want you to sit with something. How does that make you feel? Not think, feel. Because for a lot of people, when this idea first lands, there is a strange combination of emotions. There is relief, like something you've been searching for your entire life just turned out to be already here. And there is also a kind of resistance, because the mind immediately says, but if I am divine, then why does my life feel so hard? Why do I struggle? Why do I feel so lost sometimes? That's the exact question Alfas B addresses next, and the answer is one you won't forget. Before we go deeper, if this is already making you think differently about yourself, drop a comment below. Even just one word. Anything, because I genuinely want to know what's moving inside you as you listen to this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We're only halfway through, and it gets even more profound from here. Let's talk about pain, because you cannot talk about the divine without talking about darkness. And Alfas B doesn't skip it. He walks straight into it. Here is one of the central ideas of this book. Suffering is not the absence of the divine. Suffering is what happens when you resist being fully present in the experience you are in. Let me say that again more slowly. Suffering is not the absence of the divine. Suffering is the friction created when we fight against the reality that is right in front of us. Now this sounds simple, and in some ways it is. But the depth of what Alfas B is pointing to here is extraordinary. Think about a time in your life when you were in real pain. Not physical pain, emotional pain. The kind that keeps you up at night. Now, look closely at that memory. Really look. How much of that pain was the actual situation? And how much of that was the story your mind was telling about the situation? The anger that it shouldn't be this way. The fear that it will always be this way. The shame that you somehow caused it. The regret over choices already made. The anxiety about a future that hasn't happened yet. Most of the suffering is the story, not the moment. The story about the moment. And Alfas B goes deeper still. He says, the story is always a story about separation. The painful story is always, this should be different. I should be different. The world should be different. God should have prevented this. I am not where I'm supposed to be. All of it is a version of the same story. I am separate from what is good. And the peace, the peace that every human being is searching for somewhere in their life. That peace comes when the story of separation dissolves. Not when your circumstances change, not when you get the job or the relationship or the recognition. The peace comes when you stop treating life as something happening to a separate self and start recognizing it as something happening through and as your deeper nature. And here's where it gets really personal, because Alfas B doesn't just give you the philosophy, he shows you what it looks like in ordinary life. He talks about the person in a difficult relationship who keeps asking, "Why is this person doing this to me?" And he says, notice that question. It already assumes a completely separate self on one side and a threat on the other. What if instead you asked, what is this experience showing me about my own nature? Not in a toxic, self-blaming way, but in a curious, open way. Like a scientist studying a fascinating phenomenon. What is this moment teaching the divine? Through me. That one shift, that tiny pivot in perspective, that is the practice at the heart of this entire book. Section 5. The Three Veils. Now we get to one of the most powerful structural ideas in Nature of the Divine. Alfas B describes what he calls the three veils, three layers that cover the awareness of our own divine nature. And he calls them veils, not walls, because a veil doesn't destroy what's behind it. It only obscures it. The moment you lift it, what was always there is suddenly visible again. The first veil is identity. This is the story of who you are, your name, your past, your roles, your failures and achievements, your personality, the self you've built and defended your whole life. None of it is false. All of it has value. But when you mistake the story of yourself for your deepest nature, you've put on the first veil. You've confused the wave for the ocean. And here's the terrifying and liberating truth Alfas B offers. You are not your story. Your story happened to you, through you, around you. But you are the awareness in which that story is taking place. You are not the character in the movie. You are the screen on which the movie plays. The character can suffer. The screen is never touched. The second veil is belief. Not just religious belief, all belief. The belief that the world is a certain way, that you are a certain way, that life works a certain way, that God is a certain kind of being. Alfas B makes a fascinating point here. He says, every belief is a filter, and a filter, by its very nature, keeps some things out. So when you believe with absolute certainty that you understand the divine, you've actually just limited it to the size of your concept. And the divine, by definition, cannot be contained in a concept. The moment you think you've grasped it, you've grasped something else. This is not nihilism. This is not saying nothing is real. It is saying, hold your understanding lightly. Stay curious. Remain open. Because the divine is always larger than your last idea about it. The third veil is perhaps the most surprising. Alfas B calls it the veil of seeking itself. This one stops people in their tracks. He says, the desperate, anxious, achievement-oriented search for the divine, the constant feeling that you're not there yet, that you haven't arrived, that you're still missing something. That very feeling of searching from a place of lack is itself the thing that keeps you from recognizing what's already here. Because you cannot find what you never lost. You can only remember it. And remembering is a completely different movement than seeking. Seeking says, it's out there. I must go get it. Remembering says, it was here all along. I just wasn't looking. This is the turning point of the entire book. Section 6. What recognition actually feels like. Now here's where most books on spirituality go soft. They say things like, find inner peace, awaken your soul, connect with the divine. And you think, okay, but what does that actually mean? In my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, with bills due and a kid crying and a meeting in 45 minutes. Alfas B refuses to let the book stay in abstract territory. He talks about recognition, and he's very specific about what that feels like. He says, recognition is not an explosion. It is not a dramatic moment where lightning strikes and you suddenly float above the noise of your life. For most people, recognition is quiet. It might happen in a moment of absolute stillness. Maybe you're in nature. Maybe you're watching the sun go down. Maybe you're alone in a room after a long day. And for just a second, you notice something. There is something here. Not something you created or earned or figured out, but something that was always present, underneath all the noise. A stillness, an awareness, something that watches without judging, that is here without effort, that needs nothing to be complete. And in that moment, even if it lasts only a few seconds, you are not performing. You are not trying to be someone. You are not worried about the past or the future. You simply are. Alfas B says that is the recognition. That is the opening of the veil. Not some elevated mystical state reserved for monks on mountaintops. Just this. Just the simple, stunning, undeniable fact that awareness is here. That you are here. That beneath everything you do and feel and think, something is present that has never left. And that something, that is what this book calls the divine. Not distant, not above, here, as close as your own breath, as immediate as this moment. And here's where Alfas B says something that I think is the emotional heart of this entire book. He says, the reason humans are so drawn to love is because love, at its core, is the experience of connection where the sense of separation temporarily disappears. Think about the moments in your life when you have felt most alive, most at peace, most yourself. Were those the moments when you felt most separate, most guarded, most defended? Or were they the moments when something softened, when you were with someone you loved and the boundary between you didn't feel so hard? When you were in the middle of a beautiful landscape and the line between you and the world blurred? When you were so deep in a creative flow that you forgot to worry about who you were? Those moments. Those are the moments the veils thinned. Those are the moments the divine recognized itself through you. And Alfas B says, that's not a coincidence. That is the nature of the divine calling you home, over and over again, through every experience that makes you feel whole. 7. Living from the recognition. So what does it look like to actually live from this understanding? Because this is where the rubber meets the road. Alfas B is very grounded here. He's not asking you to quit your job and sit in a cave. He's not asking you to become emotionless or detached or stop caring about your life. He's inviting something more subtle, more practical, more radical. He calls it living as the witness. And here is how he describes it. There is a version of you that is always in reaction mode, triggered by what happens, shaped by what people say, driven by fear of loss and hunger for approval, always comparing, always defending, always strategizing, always pushing. That version of you is not bad. It's not wrong. It's human. It's the character in the movie. But beneath that character, there is a witness, an aware presence that can observe the character reacting without being consumed by it. And the practice that Alfas B proposes is deceptively simple. In moments of stress or pain or confusion, before you react, pause, just for one breath, and ask yourself, who is noticing this? Not what is happening, but who is noticing it? That small question, that tiny pivot of attention, is the gesture of remembering. You are not just the experience, you are the one who is aware of the experience. And that aware presence, that is the doorway. Starting today, if you take nothing else from this book, try this one thing. In the next moment that feels overwhelming, pause for one breath and silently ask, who is here, noticing this? You don't need an answer. The asking itself is the practice. That one question, asked sincerely in the middle of real life, is how the divine remembers itself through you. We started this conversation with a question. What if everything you've been told about who you are is wrong? And now, I hope you can feel the answer in a way that goes beyond words. You are not wrong. You are not broken. You are not less than. You are not unworthy. You are not waiting to become something. You are the divine in the middle of its greatest adventure, temporarily veiled by identity, by belief, by searching, but always, always, intact underneath all of it. And Alfas B ends this book with something I want to leave you with. He says, the spiritual journey is not about going somewhere. It is about recognizing where you already are. It is not about becoming more. It is about remembering what you have always been. And every single moment of your life, even the hardest ones, even the ones that broke you open, they were not mistakes. They were the divine getting intimate with its own creation, learning what love feels like from the inside of a human heart, learning what courage feels like from inside a moment of real fear, learning what beauty feels like from behind human eyes. Every moment you have ever lived was the divine saying yes to the full experience of being. And so, if you are sitting somewhere right now feeling lost or confused, or like you have fallen behind in some invisible race, I want you to hear this. You haven't fallen behind. You are exactly where the story needs you to be. Not to stay there forever, but to discover something you couldn't have found anywhere else. Something about your own nature, something about the nature of the divine. Alfas B closes with this. He says, you don't need to find the divine. You need to stop running from it. It has been chasing you your whole life. In every longing, in every love, in every moment of beauty that stopped you still. That was the divine recognizing itself in your eyes. And now, maybe, you can let it. Before you go, I want to ask you something genuinely. Of everything we explored today, the three veils, the wave and the ocean, the witness, the practice of one breath, what is the one idea that landed for you most deeply? What is the one thing you already knew somewhere inside you, but needed to hear out loud? Drop it in the comments. Not for me, for you. Because something powerful happens when you take an internal shift and give it a voice. At the end of the day, your life doesn't change in one big dramatic moment. It changes in small, quiet recognitions, repeated every day, in the pause before the reaction, in the question asked sincerely, in the moment you stop treating yourself like a problem to be solved and start meeting yourself like something sacred, because that's what you are. That is what Nature of the Divine by Alfas B is really about. Not a theory about God, not a religious argument, but an invitation to come home, to the one place you never truly left. Thank you for being here today. If this moved something in you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of depth. And until next time, remember the wave, remember the ocean, remember who you are.